Minutes ago, I recorded this interview with absolute legend of music, one of the great guitarists of all time, John Scofield. Totally prolific artist. It's not just me saying this. He's got a whole bunch of Grammy Awards. Everybody knows his music. From the moment you hear one note on his guitar, you know it's him. And he's played with so many legends of jazz, funk, many of the great jam band musicians. It's endless. What an amazing musician, and what a sweet guy. You hear the sweetness in his music. So we're going to chat about his work with Miles and Mingus and Elvin Jones. And I just hope this conversation inspires you like it did to me to just dive into his catalog of music and check him out live. So much there. He's a gift. And yeah, here we are with the great John Scofield. You're listening to NYC Radio Live, WKCR FM New York. I am beyond thrilled to be speaking with the great John Scofield. I'm going to skip an intro because then we go through the whole thing where you'd say, no, great, one of the great music, no, But legend of music. You've done it all. And I've been having a great time delving into your discography. And it's, I don't know, one of the great things, I just interviewed Bela Fleck, and a similarity between the two of you is you're both really on top of your game. I mean, the last few albums have been amazing. Like some of your...
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I love the Dave Holland thing. Anyway, go ahead. What are you...
I think it has gotten, the last few have been good, and I don't know. Yeah, I'm getting better, I hope. Holy smokes, might be getting slower, but maybe I'm getting better. We'll see.
Well, so many like exciting parts of your career I want to make sure we touch on. It says here you were born in Clarkstown, Mississippi.
No, almost.
Close, right?
Well, Dayton, Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
But I moved to Connecticut, Fairfield County, the metropolitan area when I was in second grade. So I'm pretty much, suburban New York background.
Right. So it was like, I guess the way you're experiencing music, it wasn't like you were growing up on the road with, someone in the band, father in the band or...
No, not at all.
Yeah. So it was records. That's what got...
Yeah. And well, and yeah, recordings, radio, very much. And hearing kind of local kid bands,
mm-hmm.
that was, that actually played the electric guitar and had drums and all that. And going to, at first, rock concerts, because back in the 60s, it seemed like there were a lot of suburban, really famous bands, that played. And, on the weekdays, sort of between their gigs at the Fillmore or something in Boston and stuff, they'd fill it in with kind of suburban gigs, which was, I'm not sure that's the case as much today, but I heard, Sly and the Family Stone and really, I remember the Love and Spoonful. I remember Cream and the Love and Spoonful. I mean, big time in the late 60s acts, The Doors, and going to concerts in like a high school auditorium.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah, that was nice.
So you got to witness Clapton and Sly and
Jimi Hendrix, and because I lived close enough to the city, so we would take the train. And Jimi Hendrix and Jeff Beck, and the blues guys, B.B. King, the Muddy Waters, and Buddy Guy back when he was with Junior Wells, and a lot of great blues too. So yeah, I got to hear those guys live.
Wow. What was that experience seeing Hendrix?
Well, I've said this before. I think it was 1968, and I had his record, maybe his first record or first two records I experienced, and I loved him. I was a huge fan from the records, and he played at Hunter College in the auditorium, um, and it blew my mind. Because not only was just the sound and everything just, I mean, to watch him play like that. And then he basically had sex with the guitar on top of that, and it was, and it was just, it made me think, I can never do that. I think I'm going to try and be a jazz guy. It really did, because I had already started to get interested in jazz, and I had like, a Wes Montgomery record and stuff, and was taking guitar lessons. But seeing Jimmy, it was mind blowing, and it really did make me think like, okay, that can never be done again. So I thought, well, if I just practice, maybe I can play jazz. That was my thought at the time.
Yeah, I mean, of all the virtues of Wes Montgomery, humping the amp was not like his
Yeah, no,
strong suit.
he didn't do that. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I mean, it's true. I mean, when you see, it's amazing with Jimmy because his studio stuff like Access, which actually you have that great cover on the Hudson of Wait Till Tomorrow. His studio stuff is so precise and controlled.
Yeah.
And then his live stuff is just a wild abandon, as you witnessed.
Exactly. Yeah. And, and I got, I was impressed by the improvisation too. That's what he was doing. And, yeah, he was phenomenal. And plus, it hadn't quite been done like that. There had been other, people that had taken blues guitar like Clapton and Jeff Beck and stuff. They had taken that idea of playing that way. But Jimmy, it was just three-dimensional, man. It meant about a million different places, as well as playing the real blues guitar, and rock and roll. The whole thing, it was all there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not like you could be notating a lot of that stuff either. It's
I would like to see somebody try. Yeah, I think they do try, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's one guy actually out in Westchester who does a very good job. But still, yeah, I mean, it becomes pure sound and it's like, yeah, something else. So then I guess you made your way to Berkeley just for a year, and then you got, I mean...
Yeah, I went for 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah, and yeah, after high school, I went to Berkeley, and I was from a small town in Connecticut. I knew some kids that kind of knew about jazz or were attempting. I didn't know anybody who played really well. I'd heard people play, but I'd never like sat down with them at all. I had a guitar teacher and he was pretty good. He was into standards and jazz and all that. When I got to Berkeley, there were all these other kids who, a lot of them were from New York, had been really up on it compared to the little, Connecticut kid that I was. And there were kids that could already play, and that whipped me into shape quick, and made me just practice all the time and really start to understand the music more. And at Berkeley in Boston, we lived right near the school, and there was a jazz club that had 7 nights a week, national jazz acts. So all the same groups that were playing at the Village Gate would play in Boston at the Jazz Workshop. And they had a deal where it wasn't expensive for students to get in, and I went all the time. I heard everything. It was a great experience for me.
And what year would that be? Around
1970 when I started.
Oh, so yeah, all the greats are. I mean, even Louis Armstrong's still playing.
Yeah, right. I heard him at Newport. I think it was that year. But yeah, they were
was that
all
the
there.
Birthday show?
Pardon me?
Oh, he did a birthday show.
It might have been. It might have been.
Yeah.
Maybe it was 69. I don't know.
Yeah, I used to work for George Wein back in the day, and he had produced Louis' birthday show with Mahalia Jackson, and all these people came out. It was a
Wow.
epic thing. Wow. So then, all right. So you kind of getting your ass kicked a little once you see, these urbane people who are already kind of.
Yeah. It's when I really got to be around people that could play, not just going to a club and sitting at a table and hearing somebody that can play, but kind of hanging out with them, and also the older teachers that were there at school. There were really great musicians around in Boston then.
So then you get the magic call or something. You hook up with Chet Baker and Gerry Mulligan.
It was Gerry, really. So I had gone to school for a couple of years at Berkeley, and then was just living up there in Boston and playing around. And there was a jazz scene there, and I would occasionally get to play with name guys, not very much, but Gary Burton. I played with him a lot, and he was a mentor, and Steve Swallow. But then Gerry Mulligan came to town to play at the jazz club, the Jazz Workshop, and Alan Dawson, the great drummer who was in Boston, recommended me for the gig because Gerry wanted to expand his quartet to a sextet with vibes and guitar. So he hired me and Dave Samuels, and he was experimenting, And then we did the week at the Jazz Workshop, and it was amazing, to get to hang out with Gerry and try and learn some of that music. And then, like a week later, the phone rang, and they wanted me to come play with him in New York at Carnegie Hall, of all places, for the big reunion with Gerry and Chet, and Gerry Mulligan and Chet Baker. And it was a CTI recording that they made of that concert. And the idea for the concert was that Chet would play with his group, Gerry would play with his group, and then they would combine. But they wanted to use Ron Carter and
Harvey Mason, right?
And Harvey played drums, and Bob James on piano. They didn't let Gerry or Chet use their bands, but they let Gerry bring his vibes player and his guitar player. So he really made that happen, and he got me on it. And then I met Chet there, and we played a couple tunes. Yeah,
that album. I wasn't hip to the album until preparing for this, and it's beautiful. It runs like the whole scope of emotions. It's like it's got beautiful ballads. It's got really driving stuff. Gerry
Mulligan and Chet were heavyweights, and in 1974, when that record was made, they were still in great shape. I think Chet sounds really great on the record too, and Gerry. Gerry always sounded good, but they were definite heavyweights that might have been past their fame, because they really in the 50s were kind of superstars. And I was so lucky to be there, but it was something else, just to be around that.
Did you feel like there was something you gleaned, or these guys would tell you explicitly that you picked up?
Well, I'm trying to remember specific things that Gerry told us, because then I went on after that and played with Gerry for a few months. He had a lot of work, and I can't remember anything specific, but we picked his brain, man. We wanted to know all about it, it was fantastic. And Chet, who I really only played with a little bit, was very nice to me, and very very much. He didn't seem out of it or anything, but I think he might have been, but he didn't seem it. And so both those guys were just really, like older brothers, fatherly, and same with all the older guys I'm lucky enough to play with. Yeah,
and then relatively soon after, then you're playing some stuff with Mingus.
Well, yeah, right. Well, what happened? The reason I left Gerry's band after a few months was Billy Cobham called me,
Oh, right.
and at that point in 1975, now Billy Cobham, it was really he was big time. You know, he had left the Mahavishnu Orchestra. He had made his classic album Stratus and some others. So he had a band. He had the Brecker brothers in the band, and it was an incredible band. And I replaced John Abercrombie, and that became, you know, a full-time gig because Billy was riding high. We worked all the time, big long tours. It was the first time I ever got to go to Europe, first tours of Europe. Then he had George Duke joined the band, and we became just a quartet with Alphonso Johnson the next year. That was really, at the time, that was really exciting and big time because there was a huge audience for fusion music.
Yeah.
And so that's what I was doing after I was playing with Gerry. But during that time, I got called to play on a Mingus record.
And I mean, one thing, I know you listen to some KCR from time to time.
All the time.
Thing,
Phil Schaap.
Yeah.
You know, I can't stop.
So one thing, I used to go to Phil's like live. I'd go in the studio. And,
really?
There and pepper his brain and ask him questions and stuff. And one thing he said to me was that you can't interview the person who played cello when Beethoven's Ninth Symphony was premiered, but you can actually talk to, at that time you could talk to someone who played on Kind of Blue or something like that,
Yeah.
or a lot of these guys, so yeah, I mean, Mingus is now on the Mount Rushmore of,
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, what I don't know. What do you have to report back from?
Yeah, I can tell you about that. So I'm sitting in my, apartment in Greenwich Village in between gigs with tours with Billy Cobham, and the phone rings. Oh, it was actually after Cobham. It was the year after. But I'm home in New York, probably practicing, and the phone rings and they say, "You want to make a Charles Mingus recording with him?" I'm like, "Yeah, duh." And they said, "Okay, be at this rehearsal, the next week." So I showed up at the rehearsal studio, and here was this incredible band with, all the guys from Mingus's band and Danny Richmond and I remember Jimmy Nepper was there and George Coleman and the Lee Konitz, the greats of jazz, the absolute tops, and we're all running these trucks out. Now Mingus wasn't there. Mingus had sent a sub bass player just for us to rehearse without him, and Paul Jeffries, the saxophonist, was the ringleader, the straw boss. So we rehearsed these charts, and it's funny because I remember Dave Holland being the bass player at that rehearsal, and Dave doesn't remember it. But I'm sure he was there because it was the first time I ever got close to him. But anyway, so then we went in the studio at Atlantic Studios, 1840 Broadway, went in there, the next day or something. And it was me. There were a bunch of guitar players. It was Philip Catherine and Larry Coryell and me. And we went in and we plugged into the amps at Atlantic, had their own amps, and we're just there waiting to play, And then Mingus comes in. He doesn't even say anything to me or to anybody. He says hi to the guys in his band, I guess, or there's some acknowledgement. But there's 15 people in the room. And Mingus comes in and we've got our music. He counts off the first tune. And we start playing. We run the tunes down. We probably did a couple of takes of each tune, 5 tunes. It took a few hours. And then Mingus, I had not talked to him. He put down the bass, and he said, okay, let's go listen to everything. We didn't listen between takes. He just recorded everything. So everybody trots. I'm putting my guitar in my case, and by then, the the studio, the control room was full. There was no room to go in and listen. So I just stood there, like sort of outside the door for a while, and then I packed up and left. I never met Mingus.
Wow.
But I did hear from Jack Walrath, the trumpet player who was in Mingus' band, that Mingus liked me and thought I played good. So that made me feel good at least. But never met him, and he died shortly thereafter. It was the last recording that he played on, because he made another recording after that, but he didn't play.
Right. That maybe it was that Epitaph record or something.
Yes, I think so. Yes.
Wow. Well, those guys, that generation, right? A lot of those were men of few words.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Randy Weston told me he thought it was because they were just always thinking about music. He'd say, "Oh, we didn't talk much. We just hung out. We hang out, but we didn't talk."
Well, the other thing is, when you get, people involved in music, they don't use their verbal skills to play music. You know what I mean? So you're used to just dealing with the music, playing the music, listening to the music. You may say, let's play Letter B twice. You know what I mean?
Right.
They might, they talk about the architecture of the music just in basic terms. Or they might say, oh, that guy plays good, or he can't play shit. And that's basically what I heard from those guys. And that's a lesson in itself right there,
Yeah. All right. So as we're moving from one face on Mount Rushmore, I guess it's not soon after. I mean, it's Miles comes up pretty soon, right?
Yes. Well, a couple years after,
Yeah.
I mean, I got to be in New York and play with really good people, and some of the Mount Rushmore guys, but I was.
Who are you thinking of?
Well, it just comes. Somebody sent me a picture of me playing with Elvin Jones one night,
Wow.
and he was a very kind person. We did a tour in Europe, and I got to know him a little bit, But I'm trying to think. During that time, also, I made a record because Atlantic. They got me on another record, Atlantic Records. There was a producer, Ilhan Mimaroglu, who produced for Atlantic at that time, who was another Turkish emigre who was really into jazz, and he produced the Mingus record, but he also produced Jay McShann record. And Jay, that's funny. When I met Phil Schaap, he said to me, "Oh, where were you?" And I know where you were, August 2nd, whatever, 1979. And I'm like, what? And then that was the date of the Jay McShann record that Phil had memorized. He just knew everything. And but anyway, I got to go play with Jay McShann, and Paul Quinichette and Dickie Wells and Buddy Tate. And these, guys, Earl Warren, the guys from, kind of Basie's band and that era, and Kansas City Swing, and one of the masters, Jay McShann, Milt Hinton on bass. This was unbelievable. We did a couple of days, so that's from the Mount Rushmore right there, from an earlier era, But
did those guys have a different way of holding themselves? The swing generation guys?
I don't know. But all I know is they were old by the time I got to play with them, And here I'm in my 20s, and they're, I don't know, but past middle age.
Yep.
And and were very kind and played beautifully still, But I remember Dickie Wells. I remember thinking that guy's really old, and Paul Quinichette, who was so beautiful. I was a fan, but I think he was a little bit past his prime, maybe. He asked me to get him a beer, to sneak him a beer, and their wives were there. It was wonderful.
All right. So okay. So you got to. I mean, Boy, I can't imagine. I feel like if any musician plays with Elvin Jones, like you're programmed to just think like Coltrane. You're like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
uh,
Well, yeah. I mean, everybody, all my friends, the drummers, they all tried to play like Elvin.
yeah,
So it was just like the greatest, and then playing with Miles again. There was like all the trumpet players wanted to play like Miles, and here I was getting a chance to be next to the real thing and all. And with Miles, that's really where I got to spend a lot of time with him for I think almost 3 years in the band, and we worked a lot. And yeah, so that
like
before
you.
that, I guess I don't know.
I
I
mean,
think
you
he
wrote,
didn't fire
you
me.
co-wrote songs. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. He well, he used the guys in the band to write music, and I ended up at that period doing a lot of stuff with him. We didn't compose together like Burt Bacharach and Hal David. He would just listen to. He would like suggest a groove, and I would play over it, improvise. And then he would take parts that he liked and use that as the melody. He did it to himself too. He would record himself playing, and then he liked this one little part. That would become one of the melodies that the band played. Everything was over vamps at that point. It was really electric groove, backbeat stuff. But you know what? I mean, talking about the Mount Rushmore as a jazz fan and everything, getting to hang with Miles and to hear about the music and his views on music and his the stuff that he liked and stories, about this guy and that guy and what he valued in music. This was really a, a blessing, to be around that.
Yeah, I mean, anything jumping out that he shared with you?
Oh, he'd tell us how to play sometimes, and he got me in a room once and he said, okay, he played piano and we played something. He goes, just play. And then he goes, you're slowing it down. Why are you doing that? And I said, well, Miles, I'm just trying to play relaxed, so it's cool, so it's not all frantic. And he goes, don't ever do that. Play right on the beat. And then I started to think about it. I realized how he could do that and how important that was, so you didn't drag the band down, even though you thought you were sounding all loose and nice over it, you could actually affect the other musicians because they would play with you and the tempo would drop. So that's one thing he told me. Another thing he told me was just play with space. And that's so important. And it unifies the music to have the band come together, and nobody wants to hear a soloist just blabbing on and on and on nonstop. It's supposed to be part of the band.
Did he speak about stylistic directions or anything like that?
He was pretty cool with me about that. A lot of times he would say what he didn't like, and then you just sort of knew. No, yeah, he talked about the rhythm section, how that would work. He wanted it to really be like some funk, like at Prince at the time or something. The rhythm section, the way it felt, But his insight into improvising, on your instrument, blowing, was really fantastic. He would. One time he said he was listening back to a tape of us, and I was playing a solo, and he goes, "Uh-oh, listen to that! John's getting happy. Don't do that, John. Don't get happy up there." I think he meant I was being, a little verbose or whatever, and so yeah, it was great.
It's interesting what you say about his rhythm, because once I took the So What solo of Kind of Blue. And I don't know if you can do this, but on YouTube, you can play things at any speed.
Yes.
So I put it on at like a quarter speed and I was just listening. And it's still swinging at a quarter speed. And as he was saying, yeah, it's right on the beat. It's really
his time thing was really fantastic. The way he could, I mean, sometimes when we'd be playing with a band and it really wouldn't be coming together, and I'd solo and maybe some of the other guys would solo, it would be okay. And then Miles would play, he would solo, and his rhythmic thing would put you right in the, and I'm not talking about like playing pushy. He wasn't, it was just so accurate and beautiful that way that the whole band kind of came together. Trumpet too can be really fantastic, pointed, real beautiful rhythmic thing can happen on, with trumpet on lines, eighth note lines,
And I watched the show. There's a show on YouTube with that band. I think it's somewhere in Germany, I want to say, with Daryl Jones and Al Foster, and yeah, you guys come out like really swinging, especially Daryl Jones, like has such an intense. And then so it was really smoking. And then it's interesting because it's like Miles was getting interviewed. And he's getting the kind of typical questions that he probably always got. And he's answering in like it's almost like mysterious answer. But then when you think about it after a while, you're like, oh, that makes sense. And he seemed actually warmer than I always thought of him as quite a frightening, the Prince of Darkness kind of thing. But I guess you got to see all sides of him.
Yeah, he could be really warm and friendly. He had an incredible personality, and he could be really charming if he wanted to be. And he could also be really cutting, and he was really smart and really quick and funny as hell too.
Did he? And you're saying he shared some stories from back in the day. Like, did he?
Yeah, no, I can't remember. Well, yeah, you would talk about Bird and Coltrane, and and what it was like to be around Charlie Parker as a young man, and But everybody says, "Oh, what Miles stories do you have?" I've already given you all my Miles stories. I can't remember anything else.
I'll stop shaking this tree. So yeah, I mean, and then okay, so time goes by. You're riding high, right? I mean, you after Miles, you're playing with all these great people, and it kind of by now it seems like I guess you're pretty defined. I mean, I guess you're always pretty much defined stylistically, right? I mean, it's like.
I don't know. I mean, the thing was with Miles, we were really doing a kind of fusion music. And after I left Miles, I started to I was able to have my own group.
Yeah.
And that became my main thing, And, of course I did record dates and special projects with other people. Sure. But my first band was with Dennis Chambers and Gary Granger and Jim Beard, and we played this music that was very electric, but I was able to work on compositions and do that. So I did that for a couple of years, and I kept playing with my old buddy Steve Swallow. We started to then play trio again and do more jazz type stuff with Adam Nussbaum. But after I left Miles, I was pretty much able to do my own thing primarily and start touring, and a lot of touring in Europe and being a musician on the road and having a band.
Yeah, and it seems like you've kind of explore both like on the newest album, I guess, I don't know, words are silly, but it's like a post bop or whatever. It's this, and then you've really reached a lot of people, myself included. Like I that album, like a go-go, like sometimes I can't sleep because some of those melodies are going through my head.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad they're earworms or whatever. That's good. Yeah, I like songs like that. But thank you. And that record, a lot of people heard that record.
Yeah. I mean, that was that, and then you like even further, like you kind of reached this very audience of people like me when I was in college. We loved listening to that record, and then I caught you. I think it was like one of the first or second times that you were playing with Phil Lesh. It was like up in Albany, and there's this moment where you like took the sheet music, because it was something that probably on paper was just 2 chords or something like that.
Yeah.
And you looked at Phil and you pretended to throw the sheet music away.
Oh, wow. I remember that gig in Albany, and that was a good gig.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what is that? I mean, it's because there is something different in that universe of groove that gets explored by by Phil and obviously the Dead thing.
Yeah, all those guys, they really liked improvisation and made sure that was part of the night, a big part of it with the Grateful Dead, And Phil, Phil was, he like listened to a lot of 20th century classical music. He knew a lot about that. And he appreciated jazz. And they tried to bring that to their band. And I remember Phil said once the Dead played opposite Miles at the Fillmore Winterland out in San Francisco. And he said, when he heard it live, it was like, oh, that's what we're trying to do, but they can actually do it. And, but what happened with where Miles decided to play jazz over a groove rather than, what he'd been doing before that and what everybody did, that was a big deal. But it makes perfect sense, and it's not like Miles invented it, because if you go back to Latin music or Ahmad Jamal's kind of vamp stuff, I mean, Bud Powell had a vamp on, Un Poco Loco in like whatever, 1949 or something. It's not like, but by then rock and roll had become this huge thing, and kids related to it so much that when Miles did it, it somehow brought in other people that couldn't relate to swing rhythms, the music from the big band era that I love, but we are, all of us, you, me, everybody under the age of 100, is a rock and roller, because that's what we heard. But if you're over 100 or maybe over 93 or something, or 80, I don't know. But if you're over a certain area, what you heard was swing music. So it was, to me, the idea of playing over groove, it's, as a jazz musician, it just seemed really a no-brainer that it could be done. And that's taking a lot of the stuff from like the Coltrane idea of the way everybody played over a one key center that wasn't one key center. It was every key, like My Favorite Things and Impressions that he did. And taking that and just putting it on the backbeat. It's like when I joined Billy Cobham's band, it was the Brecker brothers were in the band. And the way they would play with Billy on these vamps was really mind-blowing to me. And I learned so much from that. And fusion lives. Rock on, rock on.
Yeah, and it's there's certain things that work. Like, I mean, Miles Davis Bitches Brew, it gets into that spooky psychedelic thing that doesn't quite exist, against different grooves. It seems like, I wonder if, like, because I know it sounds like Miles was hearing like Herbie's Rocket, or that's what people say during the period of.
Well, I mean, Herbie's Headhunters was right at that time, and then Rocket came up, but Miles loved Herbie, and Herbie, we got to remember, was really, man, the greatest at really being a real funk rhythm section, more than Bitches Brew had been,
Right, yeah. What was it? He had the clavinet instead of the guitar doing that. Yeah, and so recently you've kind of done some deep dives with the No Country for Old Men, going into that. Earlier than that, I guess, you had that very successful album doing deep dives into Ray Charles music. I'm just curious if anything came out of it for you, like,
stuff comes out of it from all those projects for me, David. I mean, the Ray Charles albums, I'm like just about everybody I know, I'm a big Ray Charles fan. But then getting to really work on those songs and use those as a way to, it was wonderful. The musicians I got to play with, and Steve Jordan and Willie Weeks, beautiful rhythm section, and Larry Goldings on keyboard. And then with all the singers, and to be inspired by them. But we had Mavis Staples and Aaron Neville, and then John Mayer came in and sang a tune and played his ass off, and it was fantastic. And then on country, it's called Country for Old Men, where I've always liked country music, especially the old stuff like Hank Williams, and George Jones after him, and I really loved that genre, and tried to bring some of that to my jazz thing, and I thought we were successful, at combining the two, and that was great to think about that music and to try and play some of those melodies. I remember, I actually transcribed a George Jones vocal performance, because there are all these little in-between notes that he plays, or that he sings. I'm trying to do that on guitar, called Mr. Fool on that record. And so I've been lucky. I've gotten to make a bunch of records back when there was a little bit more of a record business. And I mean, right now, the budget that we had for the Ray Charles record, I'm sure no record company would allow that nowadays.
Yep. Yeah, now it's more a shingle to put up for the tour, right? But
yeah, kind of, yeah. Well, I mean, luckily making jazz records it's about just capturing it in the studio, and you can do it pretty quickly and relatively inexpensively. So I'm able to make records on ECM records that don't cost a shitload, and I still make a little money off them and get to make a nice studio recording that sounds good. But it's getting harder and harder. And I was talking to one guy, Gideon King, and he's more in the kind of singer, but he has a band, and he writes tunes with vocals and everything. And he said, no, the days are over where you do it with a record company. You do it, you're on your own, and you put out like 4 tunes or 3 tunes at once, and you just put them on Spotify yourself. And I thought, oh, that's great. Okay. And he's telling me all about that. That's how you do it. Then I realized after I was talking to him, you don't make any money. You spend money. I've been, blessed to actually make money from making a recording, but it's changing.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, whatever. There's many of those jokes, right? How do you make $1 million in the music business? You start with 2 million.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of these things. Yeah. So, I mean, I know we're close to you're having to jump, but I guess the big essential question, it's kind of the same thing I was wondering from Bela. It's like, what do you think? I mean, you have really maintained artistically, at the top of your game from my perspective, for decades now, and commercially as well. It's like there's a big line to go see your shows. And what do you think's at the heart of that?
Well, probably that I stopped drinking and getting high in 1986, so I have more energy to do that stuff. Of 96, whoops. That's that's maybe one reason that I'm around, and I've been lucky, been in the right place, right time, and you build from one thing. So the stuff we're talking about in the 70s put me on the map, so to speak, somewhat in New York, jazz music center of the world at that time, and I think probably still is. And I've been able to just keep going, So I've been around it, and I haven't been off the scene. I've been on the scene, so I'm known. So people, will come to the Blue Note or wherever I'm playing. There'll be enough people so that I get to come back the next year, and then I get to have a band and offer people employment and make records and get better at playing guitar. Because that's one thing, playing with other people and performing, I really think you improve at a different rate than when you're just sitting home. So I don't know. I it's good. I hope it doesn't stop.
Yeah. Well, there's no signs of that. Yeah. I mean, it seems like, yeah. I mean, it seems. Maybe from the outside, it's just that it's really all about music. That your dedication to music is really pure, so that your level's just maintained high, and people want to,
Well, yeah, I'm dedicated to the music, and there's enough there, I guess, so it's not so alienating to some. I got to also say, it's really been having. This is a business, as well as an art form. It's both, but there is a business aspect. And my wife, Susan, started handling the business end of of my career a long time ago, after I left Miles. And she's just a really good business person. And I've been lucky to have her covering that aspect. And, this doesn't always work out, as we know, with couples going into business together, and usually probably doesn't. But in my case, it has. So you say, why I'm able to keep going? That's one reason. I have a lot of really talented friends who are sitting home in their apartments for one reason or another.
Yeah. Well, this has been awesome, man. Thank you so much for being generous with your time. Yeah.
Thank you for your insightful stuff, David. It's it's cool to meet you.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah, I hope we'll have more chances when you're pumping something else.
I'm here.
Yeah, and what's the new thing we should be looking out for?
Well, let's see. I'm doing a whole bunch of stuff. Steve Swallow and I are making a duo record next week. We'll see what happens with that. He hasn't been playing since he was taking care of his wife, Carla Bley, for a few years, and then she passed away, and now he's doing more stuff. But I'm also got a live record that ECM will put out next year with my trio, with Bill Stewart on drums and Vicente Archer on bass, that will be playing at the Big Ears Festival, along with a bunch of other dates. We're playing there next week.
Right, that's what this is promoting. I forgot.
Right. Yeah, so we'll be down in Knoxville at the festival, and that's really my my main group, is playing with Bill and Vicente, and we have done some recording for ECM. We did one called Uncle John's Band, and And I'm going to do some more gigs with Dave Holland too at the end of the year in duo. We put out a duo record. And let's see. And then I have a project I'll be touring with, in the fall called Electrospective, and it's a bunch of my old music from the 80s, that 90s and stuff, more kind of funky jazz. And that's with Larry Goldings on keyboards, Oteil Burbridge on bass, and Adam Deitch on drums. And I'm looking forward to that.
Wow, a lot to look forward to. Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks again. This was great. See you down in Knoxville.
I'll see you there.
Yep. All right.
Thanks. Thank you, David. Bye-bye.
This was really fun. Thank you.